My father left me nothing but a broken watch. That's how the lawyer phrased it. Flat and final. Like he was reading a grocery list. My brother Ryan got the houses, the accounts, the investment portfolio. I got a cracked old timepiece that hadn't ticked in years. We were sitting in this glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of a downtown Seattle tower. The kind of place that smelled like leather and stale air conditioning. The lawyer, a gray-haired man who'd served our family for decades, kept his eyes down on the papers, probably to avoid looking at me. My mother had been gone for 3 weeks. She'd built her real estate empire from scratch. Or at least, that's what she told everyone. At her funeral. The priest called her a woman who always won. I guess that part was true. Even dead. She'd managed to win again. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Tie loosened. Confidence practically dripping off him. Guess Mom wanted to remind you to be on time for something, he said. His wife let out a short laugh she tried to turn into a cough. I stared at the old leather watch sitting on the table between us. The face was scratched. The hands frozen at 1014. The strap cracked from years of use. I remembered seeing it on my dad's wrist when I was a kid. He used to tap the glass and say, "Every tick counts. Kid, you just have to listen." I hadn't heard that sound since he died 15 years ago. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Reeves was very specific," he said, his voice careful. "This watch was to go directly to you. No substitutions. No explanations." He paused, then pushed a small box across the table toward me. Her words were exact. He hesitated before reading the line. "Let him have his father's old junk. It suits him." Ryan smirked. "Well, at least you don't have to worry about taxes on that." I picked up the box, feeling its lightness, then stood. My chair scraped against the polished floor, loud enough to make everyone flinch. "You two enjoy the empire," I said. "I've got all I need right here." Ryan laughed behind me as I walked out. "Don't be late for work, little brother." The parking garage smelled like oil and concrete. I sat in my truck for a long time, just staring at the box on the passenger seat. The watch was heavier than it looked when I finally took it out. The back was dented. The glass fogged near the edges. For a second, I thought about tossing it in the trash can next to the elevator. Mom would have liked that. She'd spent half her life calling my dad a failure and the other half making sure everyone believed her. I started the engine. But the ticking sound I heard wasn't the truck. It was faint, irregular, coming from the box. I froze, heart kicking once in my chest. The watch wasn't running. Yet I could swear I heard a click. I lifted it closer to my ear. Nothing. Just silence. My nerves. I told myself, long day. Bad memories. That night, I sat in my apartment above my repair shop on Pine Street. The place smelled of metal polish and old wood, a scent that always reminded me of Dad's workbench. I turned the watch over under the lamp, examining the back. The brass was tarnished, one of the tiny screws nearly stripped. My tools were within reach. So out of habit, I grabbed a jeweler's screwdriver and began to work the edge loose. As I pried gently, a sudden snap made me jump. The back plate popped open. A small folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered onto the desk. I stared at it for a long moment before unfolding it. Century Trust Bank. Arling Elingnian Shurya Shasura. When the time is right. That was it. No name. No signature. Just that cryptic line in my father's careful handwriting. My pulse picked up. Century Trust. I'd seen the name before on old envelopes from when Dad used to get statements in the mail. Long before online banking took over. I leaned back in my chair, letting the paper rest on my knee. When the time is right. Typical Dad. Always talking in riddles. Always keeping secrets from Mom. I remembered how she'd roll her eyes when he brought home blueprints and calculations, muttering about ideas that never pay bills. I glanced around the shop. Half-finished repairs sat in tidy rows on the shelves. Tools laid out with obsessive precision. Dad used to say the way a man treated his tools said more about him than his bank account. Maybe he'd been wrong about that too. I set the watch down on the counter and made myself a drink. Bourbon. No ice. The paper lay there between my hands, yellowed and soft from age. 10:14. The time frozen on the watch. The date on the paper. Coincidence or message. The next morning, I woke early. Habit. I poured coffee. Stared at the watch again. I thought about throwing it away, but the note kept pulling me back. Finally, I sat down at my computer and searched Century Trust Bank, Seattle. Nothing. The only branch still active was in New York. I clicked through their website, found a general contact number, and dialed. The call rang twice before a calm female voice answered. Century Trust Bank. This is Elaine speaking. How may I direct your call? Hi, I said, rubbing the back of my neck. I found an old note from someone named Nathan Reeves. Says it's about an account. Dated October 14th, 2010. Any chance you could? There was a long pause. Too long. Then, the woman spoke again. Her voice suddenly formal. Sir, may I have your full name? Ethan Reeves. Another pause. I could hear keys clicking on a keyboard. Then silence. Please hold, she said. And soft classical music started playing. My stomach tightened. When the line clicked again, a different voice came on. Male. Older. Smooth but deliberate. Mr. Reeves. This is Charles Alden, executive officer at Century Trust. We've been waiting for this call. I blinked. Not sure I'd heard him right. You've been what? Waiting. For 15 years. In fact, your father left instructions that we were to expect contact from you when the time was right. His words. The air felt heavy, like the room had shrunk around me. What kind of instructions? Not something I can discuss over the phone. Mr. Reeves, if you can bring the watch and proper identification, I'd advise you to visit our Manhattan office. Tomorrow, if possible. My throat was dry. What happens if I don't? Then the account remains locked indefinitely. I looked at the watch on the table. The frozen hands. The dented brass. The scrap of paper beside it. My father's handwriting stared back at me. When the time is right. Maybe this was it. Maybe the time had finally come. I closed the call, poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, and stared out the window at the gray Seattle skyline. Rain slid down the glass. Steady and rhythmic. Like the ticking I hadn't heard in years. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I'll go find out what you were trying to tell me. Dad. The watch lay silent, but I could almost hear it counting down. The next morning, the rain hadn't stopped. Seattle looked washed out. Streets shining with that gray reflection only this city knows. I stood in my workshop staring at the watch again, turning it over and over like it might suddenly give up another secret. The hands were still stuck at 1014, frozen in time. The note lay beside it, already soft from how many times I'd unfolded it through the night. I didn't sleep much. My head kept running through questions I didn't want answers to. Why would my father hide something like this? What the hell could be in a bank vault 15 years after his death? I poured a second cup of coffee and caught myself whispering out loud. When the time is right? It sounded different in the quiet. Heavier somehow. I went digging through one of the old wooden crates I'd kept since he died. The smell of dust and motor oil hit me as soon as I opened it. Inside were blueprints rolled up with rubber bands, sketches of gears and levers, a small box of spare parts labeled Kronos Prototypes. I had seen that word before. It was printed on the back of the photograph that used to hang in his workroom, the one Mom tore down after he passed. I found the photo near the bottom of the crate, folded and faded. My father was standing between two men in suits, younger and thinner than I remembered, but unmistakably him. Behind them was a banner that read Kronos Engineering, Inc. The date printed on the back said 2001. I frowned. That was before he quit engineering to start the furniture repair business. Or at least, that was the story Mom always told. I took a picture of the photo with my phone and zoomed in on the building's address in the corner. Portland, Oregon. I'd never heard him mention working there. The bell over the workshop door rang. It startled me enough that I nearly dropped the photo. It was Harold Linwood, Dad's old friend. The one who used to come by for coffee on weekends when I was a kid. He still wore the same kind of tweed coat and round glasses. Like time had skipped over him too. He smiled when he saw me. You still open early. I see. Never closed. I said. What brings you in? Harold. He took off his hat, shaking rain onto the mat. My wristwatch finally gave up. Figured I'd come to the only man in this city who still knows how to fix one. I held out my hand for it. But when he placed it down, his eyes caught the broken watch sitting on my bench. His expression changed. Where did you get that? It was Dad's. I said, Mom left it for me. Why? Harold didn't answer right away. He reached out and touched the cracked glass gently, like he was afraid it might crumble. He told me about this watch once. Said it was the key to something important. I thought he was being poetic. You know how Nathan was. Always talking about time, like it was alive. He wasn't wrong, I muttered. It's the only thing that doesn't stop for anyone. He looked at me over his glasses. He told me if you ever showed me this watch, it meant you'd found what you were meant to find. That made me pause. He told you that? Harold nodded slowly. I was the witness when he opened a private trust at Century Trust Bank. It was right after his last hospital visit. He said he wanted to make sure you'd have something safe from, well, from family interference. I felt something twist in my chest. You mean Mom? He didn't deny it. She was ambitious. He admired that. But he also knew ambition can eat everything in its path. I rubbed my face. So he opened an account for me. I don't know the details. He didn't tell me how much or what it was. Just that one day you'd understand what he meant when he said, when the time is right. He made me repeat it back to him before he left my office. I looked at the watch again, suddenly aware of how heavy it felt in my hand. I called the bank yesterday. They told me they'd been waiting for my call. Said I needed to come in person. Harold smiled faintly. Then you'd better listen to your father's watch. Sounds like it's finally time. I laughed under my breath. You think he really planned all this? He planned everything, even his silence. We sat for a while after that, the rain tapping on the windows. I fixed Harold's watch just to keep my hands busy. But my head wasn't in it. When he left, he patted my shoulder. Nathan would be proud you're still working with your hands. He said. He always said the world needs more men who can build something honest. After he was gone, I sat at the bench with both watches side by side. Harold's ticked steady and confident. My father's sat dead and silent. But it was the one that made my pulse jump. I turned it over in my hand, staring at the engraving on the back. N.R. Itenjobai Joshaba. The same year Ryan graduated college. The same year Mom bought her first property. Dad had given up a 6-figure engineering job that year. I always thought it was because he couldn't handle the pressure. Now I wasn't so sure. By noon, I'd packed a small duffel bag and booked a ticket to New York. My shop could wait a few days. Whatever was waiting in that bank felt bigger than anything I was fixing here. Before I left, I called Ryan. Maybe some part of me wanted to tell him. To share the weird excitement burning in my chest. He picked up on the second ring. Voice smooth and busy. What's up? Little brother. I'm going to New York. Century Trust Bank. There was a short pause. That's random. Business trip. Something Dad left behind. A note. A watch. Long story. Ryan chuckled. You're still chasing ghosts. Mom was right. You always get sentimental about that man. He was my father, I said quietly. And a failure. Ryan shot back. Don't start rewriting history because you got nostalgic. I hung up before he could say more. The sound of his voice had always carried that same smug certainty that used to make Mom smile. Maybe she'd trained him too well. By the time I locked up the shop, the rain had stopped. The sky over the city was still gray but calm. Like the storm had spent itself. I slid the watch into my pocket, felt its cold weight against my leg, and drove to the airport. On the flight, I tried to read but couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's hands working at his bench, adjusting tiny screws, humming under his breath. He'd taught me patience through gears and springs. Maybe that was the point all along. When the plane began its descent, I looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline glowing under the clouds. 15 years ago, My father had walked into a bank in this city and left behind a secret for me to find. Whatever waited there had been ticking silently all this time. I could feel it. By the time we landed, I knew I wasn't just visiting a bank. I was about to open the last conversation my father ever started. The cab dropped me in front of a stone building on Fifth Avenue that looked more like a museum than a bank. The sign read, Century Trust, in brass letters that had been polished so often they caught the morning light. Two doormen in gray uniforms stood at attention by the glass doors. Everything about the place whispered old money and quiet power. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and age. A woman in a navy blazer sat behind a marble counter, her posture perfect. She looked up when I gave my name. Ethan Reeves. Appointment with Linda Parker. Her fingers moved across a keyboard. Then she nodded once and motioned toward the elevators. I stepped in and pressed 7. The ride up was silent, except for the soft hum of cables and the steady beating of my pulse. Linda Parker was waiting by the elevator when the doors opened. She was mid-40s. Sharp features, hair pulled back, and a calmness that made me instantly aware of how nervous I looked. She extended her hand. Mr. Reeves. I'm Linda Parker, Director of Private Accounts. Please follow me. Her office was lined with dark wood and quiet confidence. No windows. Just soft lighting and a wall of file cabinets that looked like they hadn't been moved in a century. She gestured to the seat across from her desk. Your father was a client of ours for many years, she said. Before we proceed, I need to confirm your identity. I slid my driver's license across the desk. She examined it, then reached for a small magnifier. The watch. Please. I hesitated but handed it over. She turned it slowly, studying the back like it was a rare artifact. There should be an engraving inside the rear casing. She said, Do you know it? N. R. E. Tenjobai Joshaba. I answered. She nodded. That matches. Now, there is one final confirmation. Your father included an authentication sequence hidden inside the crown mechanism. May I? I watched as she unscrewed the tiny knob, revealing a serial number etched along the stem. She compared it to something on her computer screen, then exhaled softly. It's genuine. I waited, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. Linda set the watch on a velvet pad. Mr. Reeves. Your father opened a private trust account with us in October of 2010. The account was funded entirely from his personal investments. There were specific instructions attached. It was to remain sealed until his death, and could only be accessed by his direct heir upon presentation of this watch. She opened a folder and pushed a document toward me. His signature ran neatly across the bottom. I knew it instantly. The account was funded with shares from Kronos Engineering. She continued. Do you recognize the name? My throat tightened. He used to work there. I said. He did more than work there. Mr. Reeves. He was one of its founding engineers. Those shares have been accruing dividends for over 20 years. I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady. So what's in the account now? Linda glanced at the screen again, then turned it so I could see. A series of numbers filled the page. Rows of transactions dating back 2 decades. At the bottom, a single total glowed in bold font. $19,750,000. The room tilted a little. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep myself grounded. That can't be right, I said. He died broke, Mom said. Your mother may not have known, Linda said gently. This account was private. Legally, it was never part of the marital estate. I couldn't breathe. My father, the man everyone pitied, had quietly held a fortune no one knew existed. Linda studied me, probably used to this kind of reaction. He trusted you to find it, she said. His instructions were clear. The account cannot be transferred or withdrawn in full until you review a document in our vault. He left a sealed letter there, addressed to you. A letter. She nodded and stood. Follow me. We took a service elevator down to a lower level lined with concrete walls and brass light fixtures. The air was cool and dry, carrying a faint echo with every step. Linda stopped at a large steel door, inserted a keycard, then a code. The door clicked open without a sound. Inside, The vault wasn't like the ones you see in movies. No giant wheel or piles of cash. Just a row of glass cubicles with numbered drawers. She led me to one labeled R314. Place your hand on the pad, she said. When I did, the scanner beeped softly and the drawer unlocked. She slid it open and pulled out a slim leather folder. It had my father's initials pressed into the cover. Linda handed it to me. I hesitated, feeling that old mixture of curiosity and fear that always came with anything tied to him. Go ahead, she said quietly. It's yours. I opened the folder. Inside were several pages of financial records, each stamped Kronos Engineering, along with patent numbers, dates, and signatures. Beneath them was a single envelope sealed with wax. My name was written across it in my father's handwriting. I didn't open it yet. My fingers shook too much. Linda cleared her throat softly. I'll give you privacy. Take all the time you need. When she left, I sat alone in the vault, staring at the letter. My father's voice echoed in my head, the way he used to speak when he wanted me to understand something deeper. Time doesn't hide the truth, Ethan. It just waits until you're ready to see it. I broke the seal. The paper inside was yellowed but neat. The ink still sharp. If you're reading this, son, it means you found the watch. It also means your mother has passed. And that's for the best. I wanted her to have her version of success. She needed to believe she built everything herself. I let her. But you deserve to know the truth. He went on to explain how he'd invested early in Kronos, how the company's success had grown far beyond what anyone predicted, and how he'd chosen to keep silent so our family could live without greed, tearing it apart. I stared at the words until they blurred. When I finished reading, I set the letter back into the folder and pressed my hands over my face. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, Linda returned. You all right? She asked softly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. She gave a small smile. Professional but kind. Your father was an extraordinary man. Not many people would walk away from recognition to protect their family. I managed a laugh that sounded hollow even to me. He sure had a strange way of showing it. She closed the drawer and locked it again. The funds will remain in trust until you decide how to proceed. There's one more thing. The account was temporarily frozen in 2011 by request from a Mrs. Margaret Reeves. Do you know who that is? I stared at her. My mother. Linda nodded. She provided documentation requesting the trust be preserved for your benefit, to prevent any premature access by other parties. My thoughts were spinning. She knew. She'd known all along. Linda's voice broke through the noise in my head. Whatever history your family has, it seems she wanted to make sure this reached you. I swallowed hard, feeling something between guilt and disbelief. Thank you, I said quietly. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the skyscrapers, too bright for my eyes. I stepped to the sidewalk, the city moving around me like a current I couldn't fight. My father had left me more than money. He'd left me a puzzle of silence, secrets, and one final truth I wasn't ready to carry. I took the watch from my pocket and held it up to the light. The hands were still stuck at 1014, frozen forever. At the moment, he decided to trust me. And now, finally, I had to decide what to do with that trust. The sound of the city felt distant as I walked aimlessly down Fifth Avenue. Cars honked. People rushed past. But it all blurred together. My father's words kept looping in my mind. He let Mom believe she built everything. He hid his fortune. He protected us by pretending to be small. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it did. In some twisted way only he could justify. I ducked into a small cafe and ordered black coffee, sitting by the window where I could watch people who had no idea the world could turn upside down over a single letter. The folder sat in my bag like it was alive, heavy with the truth I hadn't asked for. My hands were still shaking when I opened my phone. Ryan's name stared back at me in the contact list. I wanted to call him, to say, guess what? Big brother. Dad wasn't the failure you thought he was. But I knew how that would go. He'd laugh. Maybe call me delusional. Then he'd call his lawyer. I left the cafe and started walking again, letting my feet guide me, without realizing it. I ended up in front of a place I hadn't seen since I was a kid. The Reeves Building. My mother's first property. It still had her name engraved on the marble above the door. Even after she'd sold it to a development firm, I pressed my palm against the cold stone, remembering her voice echoing through this hallway the day she kicked my father out. I must have been 10. The memory hit me hard. Mom shouting that he was wasting their future. Dad just standing there, quiet, holding his tool bag like he didn't belong in the same world as her anymore. She'd called him useless. He'd just smiled and told her she'd be fine. Then he'd looked at me, right before walking out, and said, "Don't judge people by what they show you, Ethan. Judge them by what they're willing to lose." Now I understood what he meant. My phone buzzed. Ryan. For a second I thought maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he wanted to talk, but his voice came sharp and impatient. "What the hell did you do?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Mom's attorney called me. He said some bank contacted the estate about you." "Why is a Manhattan bank asking for verification of her death certificate?" I froze. I didn't know they'd need to contact anyone else. I said. Ryan's tone shifted. Low and dangerous. "Are you screwing around with her accounts?" "It's not about Mom's accounts," I said carefully. "It's about Dad's." "Dad's?" He laughed. "Dad didn't have a pot to piss in." "Not true," I said quietly. "He left something." There was silence. Then a scoff. "What?" "A bag of old nails." "You really can't let go of your fairy tale version of him, can you?" He failed. "Ethan. She fixed it. That's the truth. Maybe it used to be." I said. "But not anymore." He hung up. I stared at my reflection in the glass door of the building, realizing I'd just poked a bear that didn't like being questioned. Ryan was his mother's son. If he thought there was money, he'd dig until he found it. Back at the hotel, I spread the papers from the folder across the bed. Patent documents, royalty statements, ownership agreements, all pointing to one fact: my father had built half of what made Kronos Engineering a billion-dollar company. He just never took the credit. The letter said he'd transferred his shares to the trust right before he quit. Kronos had since merged with a tech conglomerate. The shares had multiplied in value. I searched online for the current CEO, Andrew Shaw, same man from the photo I'd found in Dad's crate, the one standing next to him under that old Kronos banner. I found his company email within minutes. I hesitated before typing. "Mr. Knopf. Shaw. My name is Ethan Reeves. My father, Nathan Reeves, was your former partner at Kronos Engineering. I believe you may remember him. I'm reaching out regarding documentation I discovered confirming his retained shares and patents. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I hit send before I could second-guess it. The reply came faster than I expected. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. "Ethan Reeves." The voice was calm, smooth, but there was tension underneath. "Yes. Sir, you're Nathan's boy, aren't you?" That stopped me. I hadn't heard anyone call me that since I was a teenager. "Yes," I said. He sighed. "I was wondering when you'd show up. You knew about me. Your father told me everything," he said. "He made me promise not to contact you until you came looking. He said if you never did, it meant you weren't ready." I felt my chest tighten. "Did he tell you about the trust?" "He did. He also told me not to interfere with it. But I think it's time you know the full picture. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? My office is at Shaw Industries, Midtown, 10 a.m. I agreed without thinking twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father standing in that photograph beside the man I was about to meet. Partners. Equals. And yet the world had never known it. The next morning, I took the subway to Midtown. The Shaw Industries building was sleek and glassy, the kind of place where people wore ambition like a uniform. The receptionist called upstairs, and minutes later, a tall man in his 60s appeared. Silver hair, tailored suit, but kind eyes that softened when he saw me. "You look just like him," he said. "Come in." His office overlooked the city. He gestured for me to sit and poured 2 glasses of water. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. "Your father was the reason Kronos ever got off the ground," he said. "The modular gear system, the compact servo design, all his." I handled investors. He handled genius. When he walked away, I begged him not to, but he said some things were worth leaving behind. My throat felt tight. Why would he do that? Because of your mother. Shaw said simply. She wanted full control of the Reeves real estate venture. Nathan didn't want his money tied to her empire. He wanted it clean. Untouched. Something for you. He paused. Studying me. He never told you about the patents. Did he? No. He smiled sadly. He said if you knew, you'd chase the money, not the meaning. I let out a dry laugh. Sounds like him. Shaw leaned forward. Hands clasped. There's something else you should see. He opened a drawer and pulled out a smaller envelope. I found this after he died. He asked me to hold on to it in case you ever came. I took the envelope and turned it over. My name again. The same careful handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a short line. NR Workshop. Queens. Keep what's worth keeping. Burn the rest. My heart hammered. His old workshop. I hadn't been there since the funeral. Mom said she sold it. Shaw shook his head. She tried. But it was part of the Kronos Trust. She never had legal ownership. It's still in your name now. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the letter. Thank you. I said finally. He nodded. Whatever you find there, remember. Your father didn't build for profit. He built for purpose. Outside. The air felt colder. The city noise was louder than before. Or maybe it was just me hearing everything sharper. I stared at the address again. Written in that same steady handwriting. Queens. The past waiting in silence. It was time to open another door my father had left locked. Queens looked smaller than I remembered. The streets were busier. The buildings taller. But the air still smelled faintly of diesel and sawdust. I hadn't set foot in this neighborhood since I was 22. My father's workshop sat at the corner of an industrial block near Steinway. A squat brick building with boarded windows and a rusted roll-up door. The sign above it, Reeves Custom Designs, had faded so much you could barely read it. I stood on the cracked sidewalk for a long minute before trying the handle. Locked. But the key from Shaw's envelope slid in like it had been waiting for me. The door groaned open. And the smell hit me immediately. Dust. Oil. Wood shavings. And something else. Something older. Memories. Inside. Sunlight filtered through the high windows in thin, dusty beams. The air felt thick, still carrying the faint hum of machines long silent. Tarps covered most of the workbenches, but I could still make out the outlines of tools hanging neatly on the walls. Every hammer, every chisel was right where he'd left it. I could almost see him standing there. Sleeves rolled up, pencil behind his ear, measuring something twice before cutting once. I took a slow walk through the room, my footsteps echoing. In one corner stood his old drafting table, still angled slightly upward, covered with yellowed blueprints. I brushed away the dust. Designs for furniture, mechanical systems, even a sketch of what looked like an adjustable bed frame. The initials NR were signed in the corner of each. A noise startled me. A soft click. Then footsteps outside. I turned. Heart pounding. The door creaked again and a voice called out. Ethan. It was a woman's voice. Familiar but distant. I stepped into the light. Blinking. A figure appeared in the doorway. Gray hair pulled into a bun. Sharp eyes that looked like they could cut through lies. Margaret Reeves. My mother's sister. Aunt Claire. She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. You look like him, she said. I didn't know whether she meant it as a compliment. What are you doing here? I asked. She stepped inside, heels tapping on the concrete. I could ask you the same thing. I handle your mother's remaining estate matters. The bank notified me you were accessing a Reeves property. It's not hers. It's Dad's, I said. She gave a soft laugh. Everything Nathan had came from her. Don't rewrite history. Ethan. I clenched my jaw. Not this time. I walked over to the workbench, lifting one of the tarps. Underneath was a perfectly preserved cabinet. Cherry wood. Polished to a mirror shine. My father's craftsmanship stared back at me like proof. He built this, I said quietly. He built everything in here. She couldn't destroy that. Claire sighed. Your father was talented. Yes. But he was also foolish. He could have been rich if he'd stayed with her. But pride ruined him. My chest tightened. Pride didn't ruin him. Love did. Her expression changed slightly. Softer. But only for a moment. You sound just like him. She turned to leave. But then stopped. Whatever you think you're going to find here. Ethan. Be careful. Money buried this family once. Don't let it do it again. When she was gone, the silence returned heavier than before. I looked around the workshop, her words echoing in my head. Money buried this family once. I started checking drawers, cabinets, anywhere something might have been hidden. Most were filled with tools, bolts, scraps of metal. Then, behind the main workbench, I noticed a panel in the wall that didn't match the others. It had been sanded and painted, but the grain was off. I pried it open carefully. Inside was a small safe, the kind that belonged in a bank, not a workshop. It was old but sturdy, the dial worn smooth. I tried the date from the letter first. Arling Eling Nien Shurya Shusuru. The lock clicked open like it had been waiting years for someone to remember. Inside were 3 items: a leather-bound notebook, a small wooden box, and another sealed envelope. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope first. The letter inside was shorter than the one from the bank. If you've made it here, it means you've chosen to look past what was taken from us. The truth isn't in money. It's in design. Look at the patent numbers. They aren't just for furniture. They're for something bigger, something your mother never saw because she never wanted to. You'll understand when you open the box. Love. Dad. I set the letter down and lifted the wooden box. Inside was a metal prototype, small and intricate, like a watch movement magnified 100 times. It gleamed even under the dust. I recognized the precision instantly. His craftsmanship. I turned it in my hand, realizing it wasn't a piece of furniture at all. It looked more like a mechanical heart, gears interlocking with almost biological precision. I didn't understand it, but I could tell it wasn't just some abandoned idea. It was intentional, purposeful. I flipped through the notebook. Inside were sketches, equations, annotations, all referencing something called Project Helios, notes about energy efficiency, motion transfer, mechanical storage. My father hadn't just built furniture. He'd been designing something revolutionary. I sat back on the stool, staring at the drawings. All these years, Mom had mocked him for being just a craftsman. Turns out he'd been working on technology that could change industries. He'd hidden it all here, waiting for me to find it. A car engine started outside. I froze, peering through the dusty window. A black sedan idled near the curb. 2 men in suits stepped out, scanning the building. One of them looked familiar. Ryan. He was talking to someone, gesturing toward the door. My gut twisted. Of course he'd come. Aunt Claire must have called him. I slipped the notebook and the box into my bag. Heart pounding. I didn't know what his plan was, but I knew I wasn't ready to share this yet. The door rattled as someone tried the handle. Ethan. Open up. I stayed silent. Ethan. I swear to God. If you're in there. I backed away quietly and found the rear exit, half hidden behind a stack of lumber. It opened with a creak loud enough to make me wince. I stepped into the alley. Rain starting to fall again. My truck was parked 2 blocks away. As I reached the corner, I heard the front door crash open. Ryan's voice echoed through the building, sharp and angry. He was too late. I got into the truck and pulled away from the curb, the workshop growing smaller in the rearview mirror. The notebook sat on the passenger seat beside me, its pages whispering every time the truck hit a bump. Dad had left me something more than money. He'd left me a legacy. And now, everyone wanted a piece of it. The rain came harder, drumming against the windshield. I gripped the wheel tighter, knowing one thing for sure: whatever Project Helios was, it wasn't finished, and neither was I. The rain followed me all the way back to Manhattan. It came down in sheets, the kind that blurred the skyline into silver streaks and made every streetlight look like it was melting. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, my mind running faster than the wipers could clear the windshield. Project Helios. The name kept looping in my head like a ticking clock I couldn't shut off. By the time I pulled into the hotel garage, my clothes were soaked, my pulse still hammering from the close call at the workshop. I carried the notebook upstairs, setting it on the small desk by the window. Outside, the city glowed under the rain, indifferent to the storm. I opened the first page again, tracing my father's handwriting. Precise, confident. Equations and sketches that looked more like art than science. He'd written about converting rotational energy into stored power with almost zero loss. Something about magnetic synchronization and mechanical memory. If I was reading it right, this wasn't furniture design. It was energy tech, something decades ahead of its time. I didn't understand half of it. But one note caught my eye. Patent pending. Co-applicant, A. Shaw. That meant Andrew Shaw had been part of this too. The man who'd looked me in the eye yesterday and said my father had walked away. He hadn't mentioned Project Helios. He'd lied. Or at least left something out. I picked up my phone and called him. It rang 3 times before he answered. Voice calm as ever. Ethan. I figured you'd call. Why didn't you tell me about Project Helios? There was a pause. Just long enough to confirm I'd hit a nerve. Your father was brilliant. But that project nearly destroyed him. Shaw said. He became obsessed. After the merger. The board wanted to commercialize it. But he refused. Said it wasn't ready. When he walked away, I thought he'd abandoned it. He didn't. I said. He finished it. Silence again. Then a quiet sigh. I see. You knew. Didn't you? I pressed. You knew he left something behind. He hesitated. I suspected. But your mother. She made it clear she didn't want his work revived. She said it would ruin everything she'd built. That sounded exactly like her. She'd spent her whole life pretending his ideas didn't exist. If people found out her empire was funded by the man she'd called a failure, it would have cracked the illusion she'd built. Shaw's tone softened. Ethan. Listen to me. If those designs are real, they could be worth hundreds of millions. But there will be people who won't want that truth coming out. You should be careful. I almost laughed. People like who? He didn't answer. Then he said quietly, check your father's notebook again. There's a list of prototype sites. He hid his first model somewhere off-grid. If you find that, you'll find proof. The call ended before I could ask more. I turned the pages until I found what he meant. A list written in shorthand. Site Viennas Helios Unit Viennas. Catskill facility. There was a small map drawn beneath it. That was upstate. At least a 4-hour drive. I leaned back, staring at the notebook. If Dad had hidden a working prototype, that was the heart of everything. Proof of what he'd built. Why he'd stayed silent. And why my mother had tried to erase it. My phone buzzed again, breaking my thoughts. A text from an unknown number. Stay out of it. No name. Just those 4 words. I felt my pulse quicken. Then another message came. Last warning. I glanced toward the hallway door, half expecting someone to knock. Nothing. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of sirens outside. Ryan. It had to be him. He must have followed me from the workshop and realized I'd taken something. I picked up my phone to call him. But stopped. He'd deny it. He always did. And he wasn't above playing dirty. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched. Catskill Abandoned Facility Reeves. Nothing. Then I tried Kronos Prototype Site New York. A few old records popped up, including one news article about a small research compound that had burned down in 2011. The article mentioned a suspended energy project and an anonymous engineer. I compared the coordinates in the notebook. They matched. So that's where it was. And maybe still was. By the time I packed, it was past midnight. I threw the notebook and the metal prototype into a bag, grabbed my truck keys, and left through the service exit. The rain had slowed to a mist. The streets empty, except for the occasional cab. As I pulled onto the highway, I saw headlights appear in my mirror. Too close. I changed lanes. They followed. The car stayed behind me for 30 miles. Never passing. Never backing off. Every time I sped up, so did they. I finally turned off onto a gas station exit. The car followed again, then suddenly kept straight past the ramp, disappearing into the night. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. At the gas station, I filled up, grabbed a coffee, and sat in the truck with the engine running. The prototype was still in my bag. The faint hum of metal almost audible in the quiet. I thought of my father again. The man who'd smiled through humiliation. The man who'd known this day would come. Maybe this was what he meant by when the time is right. Maybe I wasn't supposed to inherit money. Maybe I was supposed to inherit a truth powerful enough to destroy everything that came before. As dawn broke, the sky turned from gray to pale orange. The mountains started to rise ahead of me, dark shapes against the light. I followed the map from the notebook, winding up an old road lined with pine and fog. After 2 hours, I saw the gate. It was rusted, bent in one corner, with a faded Kronos logo still visible under the grime. I cut the engine and stepped out. The air was cold, sharp, filled with the scent of wet earth and pine needles. The facility sat half hidden in the trees, a collection of weathered buildings with shattered windows and vines creeping up the sides. I pushed through the broken gate, the gravel crunching under my boots. Somewhere inside, my father's voice seemed to whisper, steady and patient, keep what's worth keeping, burn the rest. I found the entrance to the main building, the door hanging crooked on one hinge. Inside, it smelled of dust, rust, and time. The floor was covered in old blueprints, bits of machinery, and scorched walls that hinted at fire damage. In the center of the room stood something covered by a tarp. I pulled it back. There it was. The Helios unit. A steel cylinder about the size of a refrigerator, lined with coils and panels. Its surface etched with my father's handwriting. It looked like a heart made of metal. The hum started faint, like the echo of a memory, then grew steady as I brushed my fingers along the control panel. The watch in my pocket ticked once. Just once. After 15 silent years. And in that single sound, I knew I had just awakened something my father never meant to stay buried. The hum deepened until I could feel it in my chest. Steady and low like a heartbeat. The metal cylinder glowed faintly around the seams, a soft blue light pulsing in rhythm with the sound. I stepped back, every instinct telling me to shut it off. But I couldn't. My father had built this. After all those years of silence, the machine was alive again. I moved around it slowly, running my hand along the smooth surface. The writing etched into the panels wasn't random. Equations, notes, coordinates. One line stood out in his handwriting. Light remembers. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt like a message. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I jumped, heart racing, the noise echoing off the concrete. A text flashed on the screen. We need to talk. It was from Ryan. I ignored it and turned back to the machine. There was a small console on one side. Its screen cracked but still faintly glowing. Numbers flickered across it. Power readings. Temperature. Some internal process that made no sense to me. I pressed one of the buttons, and the hum shifted higher, sharper. A small compartment at the base slid open with a metallic click. Inside was another notebook, smaller than the one I'd found in the workshop, wrapped in plastic, perfectly preserved. I pulled it out and flipped through the pages, diagrams of the machine, but also personal notes. One page stopped me cold. If you're here, Ethan, you've already learned the truth. They wanted to weaponize Helios. Shaw promised it would stay private. But I knew better. I built in a safeguard. It can't run without the watch. If it activates again, you'll have to choose how it ends. I stared at the words, my breath catching. The watch. The one in my pocket. My father hadn't just hidden money or inventions. He'd hidden something that powerful people wanted to control. A sharp sound behind me made me turn. Gravel crunched outside. Voices. I froze, clutching the notebook. One of the voices was unmistakable. Ryan. I killed the small light on the console and ducked behind a stack of old machinery. Flashlights swept through the broken doorway. He's here somewhere, Ryan said. Another man answered, his voice rough. Older. I told you he'd find it. Shaw was right to be worried. Shaw. My stomach dropped. He'd sent them. Ryan stepped further inside. Light slicing across the floor. I could see his reflection in the metal. He looked different now, colder. His nice clothes didn't fit the place. Come on. Little brother, he said, Let's not make this ugly. I stayed silent. My pulse thudded in my ears. You took something from the workshop? Didn't you? Ryan's voice echoed. Mom may be gone. But this legacy belongs to the family. To me. You can't just take what you think is yours. He was close enough now that I could see the outline of his hand resting near his jacket pocket. There was a gun there. I stood up slowly. The notebook hidden behind my leg. What are you doing? Ryan. Finishing what Mom started. She started by lying to everyone. I said. By burying Dad's name. His work. His worth. He smiled. Sharp and humorless. And he let her. That's what you never understood. He gave up because he was weak. No. I said quietly. He gave up because he loved her. You wouldn't know what that looks like. His jaw tightened. Give me the notebook. It's not yours. He nodded to the man behind him, who took a step forward. That's fine. We'll find it ourselves. Before he could move closer, the machine behind me let out a rising hum. The blue light brightened, throwing long shadows across the room. Both men froze. What the hell is that? The man muttered. Ryan turned his flashlight on the Helios unit. Eyes narrowing. Is that what he built? This thing? It's not a thing. I said. It's power. Controlled. Clean. Endless. Ryan's voice changed. Softer. Greedy. Then it's worth more than we imagined. He took another step, reaching toward it. Don't. I said. But he ignored me. The hum spiked, and a sharp crack of static filled the air. Sparks jumped from the surface. Ryan yanked his hand back with a curse. The air smelled of ozone and burning metal. I told you not to touch it, I said. He glared at me, shaking his hand. You don't even know what this is. Maybe not. But I know he didn't want it in your hands. His eyes flicked to the notebook in mine. Realization dawning. That's the key. Isn't it? He lunged forward. But I was faster. I turned and ran toward the side door. The notebook tight against my chest. Behind me. I heard Ryan shout. Then the metallic thud of something hitting the floor. Outside. The rain had turned into fog. Thick and blinding. I sprinted across the cracked pavement toward my truck. Headlights flashed through the mist. And I dropped behind an old generator. Heart hammering. Footsteps followed. The man with Ryan called out. His voice echoing. You can't hide forever. Kid. I waited. Breath shallow. Counting the seconds. When they moved past me toward the main building, I ran for the truck. The door creaked when I opened it. Loud enough that Ryan's voice cut through the fog again. Ethan. Stop. I gunned the engine and peeled out. Gravel spitting behind me. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the faint glow of the Helios unit pulsing brighter. The whole building trembling with energy. Ryan stood at the doorway, shouting something I couldn't hear. Then there was a blinding flash, and the facility went dark. I drove until the road turned smooth and the fog thinned. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. The notebook sat on the passenger seat. The corner of the plastic wrapping melted slightly from the heat. I pulled over near an overlook. Killed the engine. And just sat there. The watch in my pocket ticked once. Faint and precise. Like it was confirming something I didn't want to believe. Whatever my father had built, it wasn't just invention. It was judgment. He'd given me the power to decide what survived and what burned. Somewhere behind me, deep in the mountains, a low rumble rolled through the air. The sound of something finally waking up. The rumble faded into the distance, swallowed by the wind curling through the mountains. I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My heart still hadn't slowed down. Somewhere out there, Ryan and his hired muscle were either running for their lives or lying in the dark beside the thing they didn't understand. I told myself not to care. But the truth was, I did. I opened the notebook again, flipping to the back pages where my father's handwriting got rougher, more rushed. There were calculations crossed out and rewritten, a few pages torn clean out. At the bottom of one sheet, he'd written a single sentence. Power without restraint will devour its maker. The wind picked up outside, rocking the truck gently. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older than I remembered. worn down by everything I'd seen in the last few days. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch. Its hands had moved again. The time read 1017. It hadn't run since the night he died. And now it was ticking again. I didn't know if it was a sign or just coincidence. But either way, it made my chest tighten. I started the truck and headed back toward the city. By the time I reached Manhattan, it was early afternoon. My phone was full of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. But one message stopped me cold. It was from Andrew Shaw. "We need to talk. Urgent." I called him back. His voice came through tense and tired. "Ethan." "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning. What happened up there?" "You tell me," I said. "You sent people after me." His tone hardened. "I didn't send anyone. Ryan came to me. He said you were stealing property that belonged to the Reeves estate. I told him to leave it alone." "What did he do?" "He brought a man with a gun," I said flatly. "They're probably still up there." There was a long silence. Then a soft curse under his breath. "Listen. You need to get somewhere safe. The Helios project wasn't just a prototype. The military took an interest years ago. Your father cut them out. When he walked away, they lost millions. That's why the facility burned. It wasn't an accident. I felt the blood drain from my face. Are you saying they killed him?" Shaw's voice dropped lower. "I'm saying the people who wanted his invention didn't stop looking after he died. When they couldn't find the designs, they assumed they were destroyed. Now that you've activated the prototype, they'll know it still exists." I pulled the truck into an alley and parked. My pulse was pounding so loud it was hard to think. "So what do they want from me?" "They want control," Shaw said. "You need to disappear for a while. Don't trust anyone. Not even your brother. Especially not him." He was right about that. Ryan had already proven what family loyalty meant to him. I hung up and stared at the notebook on the passenger seat. The rain had started again. Light and steady, tapping against the windshield. I thought about my father spending years hiding this thing, knowing it could be turned into something dangerous. He hadn't left me a fortune. He'd left me a responsibility. I checked the glove compartment for the small metal prototype. The one I'd found in the workshop. Its surface still hummed faintly, warm against my palm. I looked closer and noticed an engraving I hadn't seen before. Unit 000, the original. A failsafe. A knock on the window made me jump. My breath caught as I turned. A man in a dark suit stood outside, rain dripping off his coat. He lifted his hands to show they were empty, then pointed toward the passenger side. I cracked the window. "Who are you?" He pulled out a badge. "Department of Energy Investigations. Agent Keller. I need a word." "Mr. Reeves." I hesitated. "How did you find me?" "We've been following Ryan Reeves' financial activity," he said. "A report came in this morning about a potential breach at a decommissioned research facility in the Catskills. Your name came up." I stared at him, unsure if I should lie or run. "You're not in trouble," he said quickly. "But you're in danger. The same people who burned that site once are moving again. Whatever your father built, we need to make sure it stays out of the wrong hands." I opened the door slowly. "If you're really here to help, then you'll want to see this." I handed him the notebook. His eyes widened as he flipped through it. "This can't be real. This kind of tech would make the grid obsolete. My father didn't build it for profit," I said. "He built it to prove clean energy didn't need corporate greed." Keller nodded. "That explains why they buried it." He looked at me seriously. "We can protect you, but we'll need everything. The prototype, the watch, all of it." I didn't move. The watch in my pocket felt heavier than it should. My father's voice echoed in my mind. "You'll have to choose how it ends." "I can't hand this over," I said quietly. Keller frowned. "If you don't, more people could die." "I know. But I also know what happens when power like this gets into the wrong hands. It never comes back out." He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "You sound just like your father." Before I could answer, his radio crackled. A female voice came through, sharp and urgent. "Agent Keller, we've got movement. 2 vehicles heading your way. Black SUVs. No plates." He looked up, his expression shifting to pure instinct. "Get in the truck. Now." We pulled out just as the first SUV turned the corner. Tires screeched behind us. Keller grabbed his phone and called for backup. But I could tell he didn't expect help to arrive in time. One of the SUVs pulled alongside us. The passenger window rolled down, and a man leaned out. Aiming a gun. I swerved hard. Keller shouted, "Stay low." He pulled his own weapon and fired once. The other driver veered off. Slamming into a parked car, we tore down side streets. The engine roaring. The notebook sliding across the seat. I could hear my father's watch ticking. Faster now. Like it could sense the chaos. We lost them near the bridge. Keller exhaled slowly, gripping the dash. "We can't stay in the city. They'll track us." I looked toward the skyline. Lights flickering through the rain. My whole life had been spent running from my father's silence. Now I was running because of it. "Where do we go?" I asked. He hesitated. "There's a federal lab in Maryland. Secure enough to hold this. But only if we can get there before they find us again." I nodded. Starting the engine again. The road stretched out ahead. Slick and dark. The watch ticked steadily in my pocket, marking the seconds between what was lost and what still had a chance to be saved. I pressed my foot to the gas, knowing every mile forward was another step, deeper into the truth my father had died protecting. We drove through the night without stopping. The highway stretched ahead like a dark river, endless and cold. The hum of the engine the only sound between us. Keller sat beside me, eyes scanning the mirrors every few seconds. His gun rested on his lap, his hand steady, ready. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the smell of wet asphalt still hung heavy in the air. Neither of us spoke until the city lights disappeared behind us. When the silence finally broke, it was Keller who spoke first. "You understand what you're carrying, right?" I nodded. "My father's legacy, or his curse." He glanced at me. "Maybe both." The notebook sat between us on the console, its pages full of secrets that had already cost too much. Every now and then I'd look down at it, wondering how something so small could change so much. My father hadn't just built a machine. He'd built a moral test, one that had waited years for me to decide what kind of man I'd be. We crossed into Pennsylvania just before dawn. Keller made a call to a secure line, arranging a rendezvous point near an old airfield outside Baltimore. He said a team from the Department of Energy would meet us there to transfer the materials to federal custody. I didn't argue. I didn't trust it either. But I didn't have a better plan. Around 7, we stopped at a diner off the interstate. It was one of those old places that looked the same no matter what decade you were in. The coffee was burnt, the eggs rubbery, but the warmth felt like a reprieve. Keller sat across from me, checking messages on a burner phone. His jaw tightened. "They found the wreckage at the facility," he said quietly. "No sign of your brother." I stared at the black surface of my coffee. I wanted to feel relief, but all I felt was the hollow ache of unfinished business. Ryan had been many things, but he was still blood. And if he'd survived, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. We paid the bill and hit the road again. The sky had turned pale, streaks of pink and gold breaking through the clouds. For a brief moment, it almost looked peaceful. Then my phone buzzed. One new message. A video file. No sender ID. I tapped it open. The footage showed a dim warehouse. Camera shaking. Ryan's face appeared on screen. Pale. Angry. Alive. Behind him stood the Helios unit. Still intact. Humming faintly in the dark. "You should have stayed out of it, Ethan," he said. "You have no idea what this thing can do. The government's already made an offer. They'll pay more than you can imagine. This is the future." He leaned closer to the camera, eyes wild. "You can't protect the world from progress." The screen went black. Keller swore under his breath. "That means there's a second unit." My chest tightened. He must have moved it before I got there. "We need to reach that airfield fast," Keller said. "If he's selling it, the buyers will already be moving." We drove faster. The miles blurred past in silence. My thoughts kept circling the same truth. My father had built 2, one hidden, one complete. And if Ryan had it? The wrong hands already had the power my father feared. By the time we reached the outskirts of Baltimore, the sky had gone gray again. The airfield was an old military strip, long abandoned except for a few hangars and rusted fences. A black SUV waited near the runway lights. Keller slowed, squinting. That's not my team. Before I could speak, the SUV's doors opened, and 4 men stepped out. Dressed in plain suits. One of them lifted a hand. Mr. Reeves. Agent Keller. We'll take it from here. Keller's hand moved instinctively to his gun. Who authorized this? The man smiled thinly. The same people who signed your paycheck. That was when I realized it. Shaw had been right. There were people inside the system who had never stopped chasing Helios. Maybe they never would. I looked at Keller. He shook his head once. Barely perceptible. Stay calm. The lead agent took a step closer. Hand over the prototype. Mr. Reeves. No one needs to get hurt. I could feel the watch ticking in my pocket. Faint and rhythmic. My father's voice echoed in my head again. You'll have to choose how it ends. I took the notebook and the small metal unit from the glove box. The agents watched closely. I held them both for a moment, feeling the weight of it all settle into my bones. Then I tossed the notebook to Keller and stepped back. Run protocol Helios. 000. I said quietly, pressing the side of the prototype. A soft whine filled the air. The men froze. What did you just do? One of them barked. The prototype began to glow. A pale white light spilling across the asphalt. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the ground. Keller grabbed my arm. Ethan, what are you doing? I looked at him, finishing what my father started. The light flared, blinding. And then everything went silent. When my vision cleared, the agents were sprawled on the ground, stunned but alive. The prototype lay smoking. Its surface cracked. Dead. Keller stared at me, disbelief written across his face. You destroyed it. I nodded. My father built it to give, not to be taken. That was his lesson. He looked at the broken device, then back at me. You know they'll come for you now. I smiled faintly. Then I'd better make it worth their trouble. Later that week, I stood in my father's workshop again. The rain had returned, tapping gently on the roof. The broken prototype sat in a glass case beside the watch. Both silent now. I'd transferred what was left of the design to a secure drive, one that would only unlock with my voice and my father's original watch combined. It wasn't power anymore. It was memory. Ryan's body was never found. Shaw resigned quietly. Keller vanished into another assignment. The world kept spinning, but I'd made my choice. Some legacies aren't meant to be inherited. They're meant to be protected. I looked at the empty chair by the workbench, the one where my father used to sit. For the first time in years, I felt like he was there with me. You were right, Dad, I whispered. Love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. The watch ticked once, soft and final, then went silent again. If you've ever uncovered a secret that changed the way you saw your family, tell me about it. I read every story. And if this one made you feel something, stay a little longer. There are more truths waiting to be told.